Here we go.
All right.
All
Thank
right.
you all for joining us. Thank you, Brian, for joining me as well. This is our fourth and final episode of the pilot season of From Here to There, which has been a really great journey and road getting to know so many different alum, their journeys, their immediate moves after graduation, and how they've just gone through their career. So I'm very excited to be sitting here with Brian, who is coming from sitting in sunny California, and excited to hear more about your journey. And we'll just dig right into it. So let everyone know, when did you graduate from University of Michigan, and what were your majors?
So I graduated in 2000. Well, first of all, let me thank you for this. This is super awesome. Thank you, Stephanie, for this idea. And you've been my ambassador through all this. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, John. Those guys have sort of been my guardian angels throughout my career since graduating from Michigan and throughout my time at Michigan. So
Hint,
they were
hint, stay close.
stay close. Yeah, they were instrumental in my growth as a person, as an artist. So I very much have a lot of love for them. So yeah, so your question was, when did I
When did you
graduate? Yes,
graduate in your
I
majors?
correct. I did. I graduated in 2004, and I was in the School of Industrial Design. At that time, it was the School of Industrial Design. I don't know if it's still called that, but I was in that school, and then I was in the College of Engineering as a mechanical engineer. And I had started
Okay.
Michigan as a mechanical engineer, actually, because I sort of wasn't too keen on how to make a creative career coming out of just growing up out of high school, and wasn't totally sure about how to it wasn't clear to me at that time. So I was always in engineering, in the engineering world, and I sort of had to my understanding at that time, I had a liking of it for sure, and I could do it at a good level. And so I decided that was what I was going to do. So I did mechanical engineering my first year, and after my first year, I sort of realized I was in the College of Engineering, and then I realized, oh, you know what? I think I need something else. And so I walked over to the school, which was across the street from the engineering school, and I had a portfolio of just drawings. And there was a lady named, I think her name was Carolina at the time, who was the admissions person, and I think it was John there and everybody else. And then after that, I got into the school. So I was dual enrolled for the remainder of my time at Michigan. So I did both schools and finished in 5 years. It took me 5 years
Huh.
to do that program. So yeah,
So
that
you
was,
left, so you ended up leaving dual degree.
I left dual degree. Correct. It was kind of a
So
new program, but yeah.
when and lots of students have done that before.
Hmm.
So that's good to hear. Just another example of kind of how that's happened. Um, what were some of the classes, if you can remember any, that you did in the stamp school that were kind of instrumental into what you were thinking about doing next? I mean, you had already been doing engineering for so long, and then you
Hmm.
started this journey with the stamp school. Were you swayed at all taking more art classes, or were you still feeling like, I don't know if there's anything for me after after college, career wise?
Um, no, well, to start, I think one of the big thing was, I remember taking this class by a lady named Patricia Olenek, who was a professor at the time. And it was just a drawing class, and I just remember her giving me so much encouragement to feel like, because there's a degree, to some degree, you like your work, but to see people really respond to your work in a way that, as an
Yeah.
artist, it sort of is like, oh wow, I can do this maybe, and that feeling was great, and it kind of kept me going. And then I remember just going into the program. When I got into the program, obviously people like Brian and people like John, who were super like cheerleaders for you the whole way. But then like the teachers, there was, rest in peace. There was a guy who was super instrumental, a guy named Sean Jackson, who was a professor at the time. Jan Henrik Anderson, who was really a huge mentor to me uh, while I was there, and just saw everything I did was like, he saw you have these teachers that just kind of see you in a light that just, wow, you don't even see. totally you in yourself at the time. They're just like, man, you need to keep going with that. That's gonna, you know what I mean? Like that was kind of that vibe, and those were big people to me when I was in the program, and it encouraged me tremendously at that age, of be 18, 19 years old, just really trying to find who I was. I didn't totally see how I would end up where I am today through that, but I knew that that experience gave me the confidence that as an artist, I think I needed to sort of keep going, if that makes sense.
Sure.
That it would never be something that I would just give up or let go of. So it was a hugely instrumental um, part of my life and development. And after I finished, so that's a great question. I had done, because I was in both schools, I was doing a lot of these like internships in both. Well, I was really doing most of the internships were in the engineering world.
Okay.
And my last internship, I kind of found a way to make art out of it, if that makes sense. Well,
Nice.
I'll tell you how it makes sense. The last internship I did when I was in college was at Apple Computer, and so I was a designer, a product designer. So that's sort of like an engineer that works in, I was working on at that time the first versions of what was the iMac that we know today, the flat panel iMac or whatever.
Cool.
And I was designing like parts, or just helping design parts inside the thing or whatever. And at the end, at the same time, they had this film competition at Apple. And so Apple is like a super chill, but it's like a very creatively robust company. It's a lot of people there, and there's a lot of really creative people there. So I decided me and my buddy would enter this contest with my buddy Kenny Lee, and we did this thing. It was like a little commercial, and it was for the interns. And we ended up winning this little commercial, this little film competition. And I did the storyboards for it, and I acted in it. And that was the first time I'd ever drew a storyboard. It was like, I thought to myself, well, I could draw. Maybe I could draw the pictures of how this thing will work. Yeah. It was that kind of like, maybe. And so we ended up doing this thing. And when it won, it was just like, what? I had no clue that this was something that I could like even do at that level. And so it was just one of those things where I remember Steve Jobs liked the film and this kind of weird stuff, and you hear all these stories, and it just really inspired me to say, okay, this art thing is cool, and it makes me feel really, really great. And so I just said, okay, how would I do that now after about to graduate in like a few months? You know what I mean? And I ended up not taking any engineering opportunities after graduation, because
did you have them coming at you?
I did.
Or just in terms of like, job fairing, you weren't paying too much attention to those opportunities?
I wasn't paying too much opportunity. I mean, there were opportunities that I probably could have easily mined, like other internships, or just really I didn't even put myself really back out into the market. I mean, I could have come back to Apple as a product designer, but I think one of the things that they recognized, that I was such an artist, that they were like, you need to pursue this art thing, And the feeling was that, okay, I don't know where I'm gonna go yet. I knew that I had just got out of college, so I was giving myself some level of like forgiveness to not know exactly what I wanted, and just say, okay, well, I was living with my parents, and how would a guy get into film from Michigan without just like, I hadn't thought yet to just go to California. I didn't have that confidence yet to where I knew what I wanted to do. So
Sure.
there was it was a buddy of mine there was an ad agency in Detroit called Don Coleman and Associates at that time. It was like a multicultural ad agency. So I was like, maybe I could do advertising, and that could help me like do films, commercials, and that would like slowly get me into my film muscles, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
So I just showed up to this ad agency, had a buddy that worked there. He got me an interview, had a sketchbook. And this is something to people that feel like, I remember a lot of people saying, you'll never get into advertising. You're an engineer. You don't have any work. You just have this little commercial, and then you don't have like any credible stuff. But when I say that, there's always somebody out there that's willing to give you a shot. And it's like, you just have to keep going. And I had a friend, use your real relationships, because this was a real friend of mine who worked at an ad agency. And he just said, through that relationship, I was able to get this interview. And once I was in the room, like kind of once you're in the room, you can just be who you're supposed to be,
Yeah.
who you are, right? And that helps a lot versus just like looking at my thing on paper. Because I get it. Like if you just looked at my stuff on paper, I didn't have the experience or didn't do that in school or whatever. So I just took a risk, and it worked out to where they freelanced me for like a week. It was like, all right, we'll freelance you, see what you do, blah blah blah. And I just really, when you get that window of opportunity where somebody's just like, I'll take a chance on you, you want to
Right.
just
Give it your
you
all.
just want to go
Yeah.
for it. Yeah, you just want to go. And I did that. And I think after a week they hired me as a full-time employee at that ad agency. And I stayed there for about 3 years as an art
What
director,
was your
which was
role?
like I was an art director. So I was basically the person that would come
Wow.
up with the ideas, and I was the uh visual like designer of the idea. So, Global Hue was the shout out to Global Hue. It's no longer around, unfortunately, but that was the largest multicultural agency in the time, and it was, started by a black man, Don Coleman, that played football, that ended up becoming an ad exec, and he went to Michigan. He was a football player at the University of Michigan, and yeah, he was very he gave me that first shot, so I tremendous amount of
I did
thanks to
forget to
him,
ask you this earlier. Where is home for you?
Detroit, Detroit,
Okay,
Michigan.
so
Yep.
okay,
Yep.
it sounded like you didn't go far when you said that you had went home, so that makes sense. And then where
Yep.
was this ad agency, Global Q?
They were in Southfield. They were based out of Southfield, and then New York. They did a lot of ads for like the auto industry, and you know,
Okay,
they had other clients, but they were big automotive, like car and beer and this kind of thing. And they had expanded, but
sweet,
it was African American, Latino, and Asian advertising. So it was cool.
sure.
Super, super cool.
I just want to highlight a couple really great things that you said because one, giving yourself grace to go home and reset, I think is really important. I
Hmm.
think even now more than ever, there's just so much pressure. Just
Hmm.
because there's more technology, it seems to be more accessible, it seems to be
Totally.
easier. So there's a lot of pressure I feel for artists coming out of undergrad, coming out of grad school to be like, okay, you've got 3 months. Like, where's your
Hmm.
big thing? Or
Yeah.
immediately after you graduate, where's your next big thing? But I think it's great to like that you gave yourself that grace, especially because you were in tune with yourself, right? And
Hmm.
thinking about, okay, like I'm making this transition. I'm not sure what I want to do yet. Let me give myself that grace to figure it out and just think
Hmm.
about it, chill at home, collect my coins, and
Hmm.
see and just kind of suss out the relationships that you had. I mean, you didn't have to go far for that first really great work opportunity. And I think that's another thing that people get a
Hmm.
lot of pressure about too, is that you've got to leave home.
Hmm.
There's nothing for you where you grew up or
Hmm.
nearby or within, a reasonable distance. You've got to go directly to New York. You've got to go to Miami. You've got to go to LA. So just kudos to you for doing that, and definitely just something for everyone to think about, like to really assess your current relationships that you had. And art director is such a coveted role, so I think that's really cool that they gave
Thanks.
you that opportunity. So you were there for 3 years, and then where did you jump to next?
So I was there for 3 years, and that's another thing, Stephanie. That's such a great observation. I just want to jump really on that before I move on, but because I do think that the temptation to find opportunity, sometimes you start to think what's outside of me, in a sense, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah,
you're online and you're doing all these things to try and find like I've never, and I'll say this on record, I have never gotten an opportunity through someone I didn't know. Like there are different schools of thought. I mean, I've cold called a lot of stuff and tried to put out feelers, but and I've gotten a few like I've gotten a few like obviously like probably callbacks of stuff, that kind of thing. But the opportunities that I've sort of landed in were things that were relationships that I actually had, like people that I knew, or a referral from someone I knew. And it was sort of,
I
so
love
I
that.
guess what I am trying to impress upon everyone is that, like, if you want to make whatever change you have, 9 times out of 10, the thing you want, you already have, is what I'm trying to get to. And like, you don't have to sort of look outside of yourself for the things
Yeah.
that you really want. I think you start, just write a list of people that you may know, and just start mining, and just start putting out the thing you want. Because I'll get to a story out when I was going into film school. I'll get to it later, but I knew a person that helped me get into film school that I didn't know I knew. I didn't know I had a connection to, but just by me sort of stating the thing that I wanted, right? People were able to say, "Oh, I know this person that might be able to help you. I know this so and so, and these are all real relationships that I had. And so I just really, I think for someone starting out, or just in general, whenever you have that, I don't know how I would get from A to B kind of thought, right? Start looking inside of the relationships that you already have and the people you already have. Don't necessarily, I'm not going to tell you to not look out and try to apply to a bunch of applications online and stuff like that, but really start your journey inside. That's what I would say.
I love it. So
Thanks,
right
man.
after Global Hue, where do we go to next?
So this is an interesting story because this was not a part of the plan. The next step was not a part of the plan.
That's the best part.
The next step was to get to, I had this itch to do now what I thought was go to film school or pursue film. And I applied to NYU kind of on a whim. It wasn't too prepared. The idea came to me at a time when I was sort of like maybe a month or two out from the deadline. And I think I was just wanting to get out of, I think I was just wanting to get to New York or something at that time. I was dating someone at that time over in New York. And I was also like just feeling the need to like get out of Michigan and just sort of do another thing. And I applied, and I remember this was so weird. I didn't get into well, I got waitlisted at NYU, and the waitlist said, "We think you're better suited." I applied to sort of the traditional film program, and this was the first inkling of something that sort of led me to the path that I thought that I'm on now. They said, "Your style and your thinking and your ideas are very animation driven. We have this animation program that's out at the time, NYU had a secondary program that they were doing out of the country. I can't remember where it was right now, but it was out of the country. And I was so kind of tied to this idea of going to New York and being in New York that I said, I don't want to do that. But it was interesting. It was interesting in that I hadn't thought of myself doing animation, even though I grew up loving animation, loving comic books, always drawing. It never clicked at that moment still that I was sort of like kind of built for that world, right? But these
Yeah.
people sort of saw that through that rejection, where that rejection was tough. I remember that. It wasn't like I didn't give myself the best chance to win that opportunity, but I still remember it being tough. And I was just like, oh man, what next? So anyway, I'm still looking for other things. And in that process, an opportunity showed up where there was a gentleman in Michigan who was a really brilliant scientist, and he came to me with this idea of starting a startup company based in it was like it was a startup for a medical device startup. It was a medical device startup.
Okay.
And coming from engineering, I think there was one thing that I sort of had in the back of my brain. The two things that I really did enjoy from that experience were science, biological sciences, and I thought to myself, man, I never really, it was kind of this idea that like I wanted to check off the box of doing engineering at a super high level, versus like just saying like,
Yeah, I went to engineering school.
yeah, versus just saying I went to engineering school or I worked, at an entry level position and that was it. But I just said like, oh, this was actually a quite an interesting opportunity that actually was, new and hadn't been done before, and that challenge was intriguing. Now, did I see myself totally like being in that for perpetuity or not really, but it was one of those things that was like a detour that was just like, you know what? Let me take a second and try this, right? Because things didn't feel like they were clicking in a way that I knew another direction, and I was sort of tired of being an advertiser. So I was saying like, you know what? Let me try this possibility, right? So this is something that was in Michigan. It was right on the Grand Boulevard, little little shop in this medical device startup right on the boulevard across from Motown, and it
Wow.
was crazy. I was working like ridiculous hours. I mean, the startups were very quickly, I realized that startups are a different kind of culture, right? And there's no, if you want to say, there's no like get rich quick in that. There's a big payout to medical devices, and there's a big payout to anything that you do. But I realized at that time, part of my allure for that opportunity was that it was going to be this medical device. We were going to get in, get out. I make a little bit of money, and I moved to California, right? I quickly found out that was not the case, right? It's like, and that was a
This is
great
not as
lesson for
short
me.
term as I thought it would be.
This is not as short term as I thought it would be, and that was a great lesson for me, honestly, because not only did I got some skills from that opportunity that led me to animation that eventually uh, I'll get into later, but it was a bigger picture of whatever you do, there's sort of no shortcuts, right? Like whatever you do, it's like you may do something you think is going to be like a quick thing, and there's going to be a tough part of it, right? There's like before you get to the award level part of it, you got to go through the tough part of it, and you got to really like the thing. So there was parts of medical devices that I really enjoyed. I had an animal lab. It was weird. I didn't really love that. I didn't love that part. That was like traumatic. But it was there were parts of it that I recognized that like, okay, you really got to love something to give the amount of energy that it takes to really be successful at it, right? And it's
Right.
not like there's so much, I think part of the temptation sometimes is like, this is just a quick thing. I'm gonna get in, get out, whatever. But I found, or at least my experience has been meaningful opportunities or, that big payout when you see something success happen for a person. It's usually the work of years of just, putting in the time and going through the process of just the ups and downs, and you're seeing the person on that up. But you definitely have some challenges along the way, and you got to love it. And so that was a big part for me. I gained a lot. I gained a tremendous amount of skills that I hadn't thought about yet until I had no clue that these skills would help me in animation doing medical devices. Trust me, there was no way to connect. When I made the connection and say I'm going to go to film school for animation, that this medical device experience would help me, which was so strange. But I'll get to that later. that's, that's it. I'll get to that later. Man, that's so hot in here. I'm so like crazy. Sorry.
So what did
I'm
your
sorry.
so how long did you end up staying with this medical device startup? Did the detour end up being longer, or did you find a way to kind of get out of the detour?
I did that for about 3 years, and then three, almost 4 years, and then I had always had in the back of my mind that I was going to go to California and be a film director, right? But another thing I also recognized, this was a big lesson for me, was that everything you do kind of has like um, a momentum to it, if that makes
Sure.
sense. Like, like whenever you come to a fork in the road of your life, I feel like you really want to evaluate what it would look like if I sort of chose this path and I was on this path for a little bit of time. Like sometimes you don't know you don't it's a little tough to just rip yourself out of something after like 6 months or something like when you're on a path, but you can. But it's just, I think that path took me a few years to kind of figure out what it was. And then I felt like personally, I was a person who was like, look, I started this thing, I committed to it, I want to finish the thing that I said that I was going to do right before just leaving, because I felt like there was a integrity part to that too for me. I
Sure.
didn't want to just leave these people that were only a few people. It was, I didn't want to leave these people shorthanded. That would have been really bad, and just not like I wouldn't feel good about myself doing that. So I said, let me finish what I committed to doing, and then after that, then I reassess where I want to go. So I did that for about 3, 4 years until I said, now I'm sort of I want to just do what I want to do. And I had known at that time that I wanted to go into animation, and sort of things that clicked, and it just made sense to start that journey. I knew I wanted to get to California, didn't know how necessarily, but I had started now. I got to a place where I said, I'm going to go regardless of an opportunity or not, if that makes
Mm.
sense. I'd sort of, I'd sort of, I wasn't committed before, but once I committed, I was totally committed. I said, I'm going to give 100% to pursuing this ambition. And I had some money from working, and then I ended up going out to California and going and visiting schools. And I had got some other work, freelance work to just keep myself afloat. But I also had told everybody around me that I was leaving for California in August. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I just said, I'm doing it, and that's it. And I that was the first time in my life I had committed to a vision that I knew I was going to do regardless of if someone shows up to save me or give me an opportunity in that thing or whatever. Rain, sleet, hail, or snow, I'm going to California.
How did you put a dollar amount to that? So obviously as you were doing the startup thing, you already had started to set in your mind that, okay, I'm going to go to California regardless. But thinking about that, like regardless of an opportunity, I'm just going to go to California in August. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. How do you come up with a number for that? Were you just thinking about like how long it might take you to like get some work or make some money? Were you thinking about like, you just mentioned that when you got there, you did a couple freelance things. Were you already kind of eyeing potential opportunities to help feed you financially?
Yeah, like I knew that I had some skills to be able to keep myself afloat from
Sure.
just being in school and the skills that I had learned in college. And so I knew, one thing that was funny about that, and that's a great question, because when I left, the freelance opportunities I had were in Michigan, because I had sort of parted ways with the medical device thing before I sort of needed to keep going and do another version of the project. And so I had done a few little like things in Ann Arbor, actually, like freelance things doing design and things of this nature, mechanical design. But nonetheless, these are the people I was like, guys, I appreciate it. This is great, but I'm going to California. And one of the things that happened was I started saying these things that I was doing or I was committed to doing. I thought it would sort of have a weird backlash, if that made sense. And I was sort of prepared for that. But
Yeah.
people were so weirdly encouraging
Yeah.
when you sort of state this thing that you want to do that's out the box. Like they were like, it was one of those things where like, in a movie you say something crazy and the guy's like, I love that idea, right? It's like all of a sudden
Yeah.
you didn't see that reaction, and then all of a sudden like everyone's like, loving it, and then
Yeah.
yeah, it was like and so they they I had huge supporters from this engineering world that I was in to help get me to film school. One of the guys that I was working with, my supervisor at the time, he wrote one of my letters of recommendation to get in. Another
Nice.
guy had applied at one point in his life to get into USC Film School, which is where I was ended up going. And it was just it was a lesson for me in, define yourself, and you just don't know, like the right people will show up at the right time to sort of like help the vision, you know what I mean? Like just commit to your vision, and you'll be surprised at where your help comes from. I had never in a million years expected, this the little machine shop that I was in doing drawings for them, that they would be so supportive
Supportive.
of me
Yeah.
pursuing this sort of off the beaten path career. And I think that said a lot to me about just standing in the thing that you want, and don't let people deter you, because the right people will show up, and just, those are the people that, you'll need for the journey. But, don't worry about, if people will support it or not. The right people will show up,
Sure.
so
So after
that
you
was
arrived in California, how long afterwards did you start film school, and how long was film school?
Well, I was fortunate in this sort of where that relationship conversation I was speaking about earlier came into play. I applied to USC. I went to a few schools, and I felt USC was the best one for me personally, just based on my own like criteria of what I wanted. And I didn't want to do a second school. Like I was like, this is the school I want to do. Let me do that school. And I'm just want to focus on that. And so I did just applied there to USC, and I got waitlisted, which was super awesome for me because I didn't have any animation experience at all. And there's like 15 people internationally get into this program. So I was just like, I was just so thankful that I got waitlisted, to be honest with you. Uh, but nonetheless, I remember this so clearly. I was telling my mom about this, and she said she had a friend of the family. We had a friend of the family. Shout out to Reggie McKenzie, who knew who knew somebody else at USC, and that that person, when I told them I was on the wait list, they were like, "Oh man, um, let me see your work, blah 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 blah," and I reached out to the people. I was very persistent too, so I was kind of like, I would
Necessary.
after I got waitlisted, I was like, "Oh man, I'm getting in." So I remember, this is funny, but this is true. This is true. I did every like it wasn't a cheat, but I knew they couldn't accept gifts, right? But I knew once you can't unsee a gift. So I sent like a basket of edible arrangements with like a SpongeBob. And I was like, someday I want to make a character this iconic in your program, right? And then they wrote me back like, Brian, we can't accept gifts, but we're so thankful you sent this. We put it out in the lab in the hallway for the faculty. I was like, that's all I needed. I was like, no, but I just pursued it. Eventually, when the wait list opened up, I got on the wait list. So I mean, I got into school when they started admitting people from the wait list, and I was fortunate enough to be one of those people. So I mean, I don't know per se how all those things helped me, but I feel like they did, and I feel like relationships definitely help push you over the edge, and just that personal touch. So I'm not saying do anything illegal, but definitely like it's a process of trying to get people to know you, and just if that's something that is right for you, then it would happen. But I was also open to not getting into school and just finding another way. So I mean, I was 100% committed to just finding another way, and
Right.
it just so happened that worked out for me. So it wasn't like all my chips were resting on this like USC opportunity. When I got in, I was
Right.
like, great. That's one less thing to think about, but I was going anyway, if that makes sense.
I mean, I'm sure it's different now. So what was the cost of film school at that time?
Uh, Film school was like 20 something a semester. I'm trying to remember. It was like, I mean, with everything, um, per year, I feel like it was like, don't give me the line, but it was like, I felt like it was like 30,000 or something crazy like that.
And how many years were you
Over
there?
a semester. It's a 3-year program. So,
That's 3-year program.
one of
Are
the true
scholarships
things
a thing?
I
Like
did, yeah,
how
yeah.
like so how did you pay for film school?
So that's a great question. So look, there's a part of this experience that I can't sugarcoat and say that there's like an out, or there's going to be a way to get through the pain of what, there's an investment to it. And there are scholarships. I got a few scholarships coming in. I would implore anybody to find scholarship monies prior to going into that program as much as possible. But from the school's perspective, there weren't a ton coming into it. I got like 2 or 3 when I first came into it, which was
Hmm.
great. Covered a little bit, but it wasn't really like putting a
Sure.
massive dent in it. Do you know what I mean? To
Yeah.
be honest, like a few thousand here, a few thousand there. And then I think what happened was there's opportunities to get scholarships throughout your time there. So that's a big part of it. But a lot of people come out with student loan debt, and going to the graduate school experience. It's just,
Sure.
that's an unfortunate part of the system that I think, that's just what it is. But there are ways to circumvent that, and everyone comes from different financial situations for sure. So it's one of those things that you definitely want to be mindful of. It made me, because I was having to pay for this myself, it made me very aware of like how to maximize my opportunities so that I could, I came from a 6-figure kind of world in engineering when I left to go to film school. And, you know, I, I, I'm not saying this to deter anybody, but my first internship while I was in school was like $10 an hour at Nickelodeon, right? And the catch to it was, okay, this is something that I know people make good livings off of this. I've seen it, I've heard of it, I've read it, and I know it happens. How do I become one of these kind of players, right? And how do I design my career? Because I had worked a little bit, and I will say that having some life experience before you make a commitment like graduate school does help, because or if you just have that sort of knowledge of what you want. But I think for me, it was helpful in that I knew I had techniques. I mean, I had sort of what would you call it? I've had just the life experience gave me perspective, and I think perspective is a huge advantage when I was in school. I was like the oldest person in my class in animation out of 15 people. I wasn't the oldest person in the school because people go to film school at all ages. They were like people in their, late 50s, 60s. There was a range of people in film school. But for me in animation, it's kind of skewed younger. And but I think my age, and I remember being a little conscientious about that, but it really played to my advantage because I saw the areas that I wanted to go into. I used my first year of film school as like a test ground of seeing
Mm.
everything I could. I didn't even think I would finish film school, if I'm very honest with you. My
Wow.
goal to go to film school was just to get a deal and leave. That was it. That was it. Like my goal to
You weren't
film school was
committed to the
like
whole 3 years. You're just looking for that
I was not
opportunity.
committed. I was not committed to the whole 3 years at all. My thing was to go there. It wasn't about the degree. I saw the bigger picture of like I need to monetize this opportunity to get something going. And I was constantly making TV shows, and I was building this sort of library. And it just so happened that film school actually was an amazing opportunity because one of the things that I think I got that I didn't really realize, and they try to impress upon you at a place like USC, I can't speak for every other school, I can only speak for that experience. The network that you make, and it's kind of similar to Michigan, but USC, I would say, in the sense that like film school is like it's a super small community, just like it's just like all art communities. It's a super small community, and it really pays to know each other. It's all about that personal relationship thing too,
Yeah.
It's like I've basically gotten everything that I have out of USC and the relationships that I've gotten out of USC. And that has been pretty much, through just that experience of being there. And I just came back from storyboarding on a buddy's film who got his first directing opportunity. He has a film called They Clone Tyrone with Jamie Foxx and John Boyega, my buddies Jewel Taylor and
Wow.
Tony Redmeyer, and they asked me to come on and storyboard the film, so I storyboarded that film for them while I was at Disney, and I just kind of was doing that on the side. But I went down to the shoot, and that opportunity, just through their relationship, my relationship with these guys who literally were my friends in film school, it helped me get into other things. Like I'm now getting into the Art Directors Guild and these things where I can work. There's other levels of like in the film style. I don't want to bore you, but there's unions you got to get into, like the Writers Guild and the Directors Guild and all this kind of stuff. So anyway,
Yeah.
for storyboard artists or production designers, there's one called the Art Directors Guild, and that's sort of something that relationship helped me facilitate that opportunity. So it's literally like, and these are well-paying jobs, extremely well-paying jobs, extremely well-paying, and they definitely can help you. Um, you can live very, very, very well if you sort of manage your relationships right, so to speak. I mean, you have to have quality work. I'm not gonna say this
Sure.
is that's a
I know
prerequisite.
those
I'm
guilds
just
have
that's a
criterias too. It's not like they don't make it easy to join those
correct,
types of
correct.
organizations.
Correct, correct. So anyway, I guess long story short, uh, so much of that was just staying in film school. The for a place like a USC that had tremendous amount of resources, I didn't know anything about film. So it was kind of like for me, I didn't know anything about film at that level. And so for me, I was just getting, it was like I was like a sponge, and I
Right.
just used every trick in the book that I knew. Teachers that I couldn't get into their class, yo man, can I draw something for you later if you need a pitch? And they let me just sit in the back of the class. I don't even need to sit. I just need to stand and hear the information, that kind of
Right.
stuff. And I was just super hungry. I was super hungry. And that helped me out a lot because I had sort of known that this was my shot, and I want to make sure that I like maximize every second of it. So for me, that's how I approached it. And I think living helped me, having a little bit of experience out of graduate school helped me do that. But also having to pay for it gave me that drive too. So I didn't I made sure that every drop of this time I was making the most of it. It wasn't a joke to
It's
me.
a
You know what I
different
mean?
level
Like
of dedication when it's
totally,
like you're footing the
totally,
bill, and when you know
totally,
that like what you get out of this is going to help you pay off those loans that you had to take out. So
totally.
yeah, I can get that being a different kind of relationship. Just want to remind everyone, this is a really great conversation. If you've got any questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat.
Hmm.
We're happy to take them as soon as they come up. So Brian, when you left, or I guess you were already in California. So when you finished film school, well, I mean, did it pay off the way you wanted to? Was there some downtime, or do you feel like you went straight into that big opportunity?
That's a great question. The thing that happened for me was unique, I will say. And I did you do a thesis film at the end of your time at in the film school program. I was in the animation program. There are different schools in the film school. There's a writing program. You do something different. But in the production program, traditional film, animation, you have to do a thesis film. And my thesis film, I had kind of accumulated all these different skills from like working in medical devices and being in engineering and doing art and advertising and this kind of thing. So I just said, let me, instead of trying to do something outside of myself, and I was fortunate to have mentors that said, just do kind of made me focus inward again, focusing inward, not trying to look outside myself, do the things that I love and do use the skills that I've gained along the way to make something. And I did this super ambitious film with another friend of mine called Mosquito, The Bite of Passage. And that was a film that essentially had live action actors with animated characters. And so some of that engineering CAD modeling came into play, some of that, all these little interesting, like my industrial design background, designing the characters and the mechanisms in the film, all that was just like parts of my skill sets sort of coming together. I did this film. It was at the time, it was the most ambitious technical film that, as the faculty said, that had ever been done at USC. And
Nice.
there was a huge hesitation to finish it because of there was a lot that was going on that they were like, maybe you might not be able to finish this, you might need to cut it down. I wouldn't necessarily go that route, but I just had this faith that I was like, I just, this is the thing I want to do. I did it. The soon after I finished it, I was once again, I was under the impression that I need to do everything on my own. No one's going to give me an opportunity. No one's going to give me a shot. I need to build everything from scratch. So I ended up thinking through this as a small film for a bigger feature film concept.
Mm.
That's what my idea was. So I approached this guy who came to speak at USC. Usually they have a lot of people that come to speak at USC for different programs and famous directors or agents, whatever.
Sure.
This gentleman happened to be a very influential person that had a thing called the Blacklist, and it was the Blacklist was basically like a database of scripts that basically like the industry's I don't know how you it's like the top scripts in the industry go through the Blacklist, if this makes sense. They're just like, well, anyway, this guy saw it and he was impressed by it, and then he was able to sort of show it to other people. And it's one of those a little bit of a little bit of a, I don't want to say a Cinderella-ish thing, but it definitely helped me meet people that gave me my first opportunity, which was to go to Fox Animation. And that thesis film, your thesis film is kind of a critical thing to where you just, that's your kind of calling card opportunity to get to get opportunities. And it worked out for me. And I was
Nice.
able to make a comfortable living and all that kind of stuff relatively soon out of film school. I probably took a year before that happened after I graduated. And I did little odd jobs of storyboarding for commercials and things of this nature. So there's a part of it, there's ups. And let me back up. When I got my opportunity at Blue Sky, there's something that happened right after I got it that caused me to leave the studio. Disney came in maybe a few months after I got this directing gig at Blue Sky to make the feature version of this Mosquito movie. Disney shows up and is buying Fox Studios. So it just changed everything. And it was like, well, back out in the streets, and basically I left the studio, and I decided to just sort of figure out other stuff and do storyboarding and this kind of thing. And then eventually I went back there as Disney to co-direct a movie, but and then the Disney just shut that studio down like a month ago, which is crazy how the ups and downs of the industry go. So like I'm like at a point in my career where I'm close to something big, but I haven't made the big thing yet. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's been like a great journey, but there's definite highs and definite lows. Do I regret anything about? I mean, I'm so thankful. I've never thought twice about looking back. I'm so thankful for this opportunity. I'm so thankful to be in this space that I'm in. But there's no, without question, I don't want to make it painted that it's all like green, a string of green lights, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's definitely a windy path.
Yeah.
When are your roles with these? I guess I'm just wanting to make sure we're all clear on the terminology. So, are the
Yeah.
roles that you're getting when you're working with these studios, are they either directing or co-directing, and you're just doing freelancing in terms of like storyboards or like using your other skill sets? But like when you're hired on to one of these bigger production studios, what is your title?
Okay. That's a great question. When I first started, I was a storyboard artist with the intent to direct this movie if it were to get greenlit. So that was technically a storyboard artist.
Okay.
So I just was drawing and learning, and there was a lot that I needed to learn, and it gave me a lot of, because when you come out of film school, you think like, oh man, I'm ready to do this, and you can, but there's a lot to animation that's like animation as a it's just a different world that just takes a little bit of learning because there's so many pieces to making an animated feature film. Nonetheless, I did that, and then when I came back the second time, I came under as a co-director, as a story consultant with the intent to co-direct, and that's where I sort of moved into that with a director, a guy named Carlos Saldana, who did like Ice Age movie and uh, Robots. I think he did Robots, but he did Ferdinand. I don't know if anybody's seen Ferdinand, but yeah, these kind of films. So anyway, that was that journey with that. So you come in, look. There's a lot of ways to come into the industry. You don't have to do studio work. You can do independent work. Um, yeah, there's just there's some people there who are like painters. If you're a good painter, some people do visual development, which is like painting the style frames or the backgrounds or whatever. There's just so many ways to come into it, the industry. But my choice was to do storyboard drawings.
So we've got a question that's COVID related. How has COVID impacted your work process practically and creatively? They're curious how this time of quarantine has changed how you look at future projects.
Yeah, that's a great question. COVID, um, I'll be honest, everything as with everybody. Like I think I'm feeling fatigued from being on Zooms all the time. And animation kind of had this boom resurgence after the COVID hit because it was one of the rare industries that could actually still exist in COVID. Like you still could work from home and you didn't have to be on a set. It wasn't necessarily, the design
So
of
do you feel like people
animation.
were like leaning that way because like, okay, we
Oh, huge.
can't have actors and actresses, but we can animate it and go that route?
Totally. That was a huge thing that happened. And um, you know, so every day I was doing this film, doing everything but through Zoom, just like everybody else. But there was really, you know, I don't know if how this will change if people still do this Zoom thing with animation. I think to some degree this is always going to be, or for the foreseeable future, it's going to be like this. But it has its ups and downs. I'm very grateful to have still be able to be employed throughout the pandemic without question. Um, but yeah, you feel the fatigue of just being kind of like you kind of miss some of that creative interaction. In television writers' rooms, it changes the dynamic of like how you interact with people creatively, but you can still get work done for sure. So
Nice. We've got another question. Do you have any tips for building a good portfolio for someone wanting to become a story artist?
yeah. I would say the big thing is I would get a few few scripts. Um, a big possibility is reinterpreting stories. So like get Toy Story 3's script, or get some script. There's feature scripts are online for a lot of feature films and animation, or if not in animation, and take 2 pages, a scene that you really like, and just board that scene out, um, and reinterpret a movie. I think one of the first films I did was Braveheart. I did Braveheart as a romantic comedy, and I used the same words, same verbiage, but I redid the whole staging, and that was a big thing. That's what got me my job at Blue Sky, basically, was this Braveheart scene that I had sort of reworked. It's like, take aliens and do aliens in a way that is your vibe. You know what I mean? If you didn't, there's always a way to reinterpret as art. So it's like just use the same script, but take it where you want to take it. And I think that helps a lot for people to see your creativity and your voice. That's a big thing when you like trying to, people hire you because they want your uniqueness. It's not just because you draw well or that's all great and that's a kind of a prerequisite, but people want your energy for the film because that's going to be shown in the film. That's going to come through in the characters and how they move and how they talk. And, this kind of thing is important. So when they say your voice, that's kind of what they mean. It's like, who are you through these words and through this? How would you have staged that differently than the real thing? What's your version of it? So that's something I would highly recommend. Take 2 or 3 of those, and that would be a solid portfolio.
Love that. A quick follow-up question. Are there I'm going to read this next one too, but
Yeah.
it's 2021. I know people always have questions about tools. What are the industry standards for, working as a story artist, working, storyboarding, working in animation? Like, what are those, what are the softwares and things that are like industry standard right now?
That's a great question. I mean, so look, I will say in the studio, it was a lot of Photoshop. I'm not, I've used Photoshop for so long. I'm not a huge Photoshop fan when it comes to storyboarding, but like it's the industry standard. It just is what it is. It's kind of changed though with the invention of the iPad and tablets. I use my iPad so much. I use 2 programs. There's a school of thoughts between them. Procreate is a big program that people use now for storyboarding. Now you can use, I mean, and I use a program called Autodesk Sketchbook, which I super loved and I used to use for a lot. But animation storyboards are a little different in that you kind of are stitching together a like a film. Like when you present storyboards in animation, you're basically like every movement of the character is like drawn. So I mean, I'm drawing like 200 to 400 images a week kind of thing for these scenes, and you're basically stepping through it like a almost like a performance, and you're doing the voices. It's like you're doing the sound effects, and that's a different kind of. So Photoshop makes it good to do what they call onion skinning and like being able to sort of like have a bunch of images that play almost like you can use bridge. There's programs, I'm not going to bore you with programs. There's programs that facilitate that so that you can do it in a certain way. But like when I do live action stuff, those storyboards are like, 6 frames a page, and those are classic. This character does this character does that, then he goes here, then he goes there. It's not so regiment or segmented, if that makes sense. So I do that on like Autodesk Sketchbook, or Procreate. You can do, those are some that I did.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Do you have any advice for those interested in art direction, specifically in how to understand your own skills and then remain confident in your abilities to define artistic choices in a project while managing the input of others?
Wow, that's a great question.
Very good question.
To remain confident in your abilities and define artistic choices. Yo, so here's the interesting thing about this question, Samuel, is like every person you work for, it's a weird thing. I remember when I first started being a storyboard artist, there was this dial that they wanted you to sort of be yourself, but they still wanted the script that they gave you, right? And it's like a weird, it's like it's such a black, like it's such a like a fog gray area that you have to sort of, it's a trial and error a little bit in terms of like you have to know if you're storyboarding for a director, you kind of need to talk and ask about what that expectation is. Like what, how much can I get into this? What do you want to keep in this? And where can I go differently? And so that's something that you just have to learn the person you're working with. To stay confident in your art, I would say this. There's a person out there that absolutely loves your art, and there's a person out there that may not love your art. And you have to know that the people out there that love your art will find you, and that you're a great artist, and that you can't worry about, you just have to do the thing that's inside you. And the right people will come to that, right? You'll find, and so you just stay confident that you have an audience out there, you have a tribe out there. Your goal is to just find your tribe, you know what I mean? And you have people that will definitely crowd and rally around you, but you just have to, sometimes you may feel lonely, like, dang, no one's feeling this. Like I remember when I first started, people were like, man, you can't draw, like you can't draw, you know, and I knew I could draw, but what they were, you know, some people genuinely may not think that you can draw, but then there's people that totally love your drawings, you know what I'm saying? And there's a part of it that's, you know, you have to just know that you are good, you're growing, you're always going to be growing, but there are people out there that love your stuff, and you have to stay committed to that idea. Does that, if that makes sense, and the right people will find you. Um, Ba, 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 ba.
Different ways someone could enter the industry. Yeah, maybe if you
About
can share a
storyboarding.
couple quick. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, you've shared a few, right? I mean, you went the film school route. What are some other routes that other people have entered?
So there's people that end up, you know, being producers. There are people that are really organized, that are creative producers. They get story, they understand how story works, but maybe they're not technically savvy in drawing. There's technical people that can design on the computer. A lot of people that do character animation on 3D, like Pixar and Toy Story, they can't really draw. Like a lot of those people can't draw. They come from maybe computer science or an area that, you know, that wasn't their thing, but they knew they can get into animation through this tool of Maya and 3D animation.
Interesting.
There's paint people that are just good illustrators. They may not be story people. They just may like, I know how to make this scene look beautiful. And those are the visual development artists, production designers. Just like you would be a production designer on a set in a real movie, you can be a production designer in an animated movie. And it's even a little bit more difficult because you're coming up with everything. Everything in an animated movie, and I'll just use this, has to be created. It's not like you can rely on this apartment, this layout of this apartment. So we just put a thing over there, put a thing. You got to come up with that apartment from the depths of nothing in your mind, right? Everything, the lamp has to be designed, the table has to be designed, the chairs have to be designed, and like that requires a skill. So there are people that, you know, you could come from industrial design, you could come from wherever. There are so many the people that are lighting experts. Okay, there are people that are compositors, people that are lighters. They may not have the skills of modeling. The people that are just model, but the lighting people know how to make a scene look beautiful. They know how to design the light to come in a certain way. Those would be the gaffers on a real film set. Everything has, there's so many pieces of a production that it would behoove you to study those things. There's a there's a book. I don't know if animation was the question for Olivia, but the God, what is the book called? Um, oh, it's a Disney book. It's a classic Disney book called the Illusion of something. Oh man, I'm tripping. I cannot think
If
right
you
now.
find it later, I can
Yeah,
share it.
yeah,
So this is
yeah.
being recorded and it's going to be shared on YouTube. So we can always just drop it in the comments as well.
The illusion of life. That was it. Okay. The
The
illusion
illusion
of
of
life.
light
The illusion of life.
of life. Okay, the illusion of
Life.
life.
Yeah.
Awesome. Sweet. Brian, thank you so much. This has been great. You have taken us on a nice portion of your wild ride. I'm so excited for you, for where you're going, for what you've done, for all the grace that you've given yourself, for all the moves that you've made, for every detour. And I really appreciate you being at a space where I can see the confidence in yourself and what you do and the love for what you do, but also the appreciation of your journey. It's just one of those things that you don't know until not even you get there, but just later, right? You don't know until later, like when all those pieces start to come together. But I think that's such a rich place to be. And I wish that for all of you that are watching, you might not know exactly where you're going right now, but just listen to your intuition, do what you think
Mm-hmm.
is right, look at those opportunities that are right in front of you, and just lean on them as they come. Like it might not make sense now, but it will make sense to you later. But
Mm-hmm.
you got to be willing to listen to yourself and trust your ability to be the amazing creative that you are. I
Mm-hmm.
think we're definitely growing in this world in terms of our dependence on creatives. I think more and more companies and industries are seeing, how important it is to have creatives. So really great to hear your story, Brian. Thank you all of you for